Hey everyone, it's Adios Amigo, and I'm doing an individual review for the Koss KPH30i. Now before I start this review, I like to remind everyone that really there should be 4 things you're keeping in mind when you're purchasing a headphone. The first is what kind of price range are you working in? What do you plan to do with the headphones would be number 2. Is it for a desktop or workout? Is it a mobile headphone? Are you using it for gaming, movies, media consumption, something to drown out noise at the office? These things matter. The third thing is the form factor. How it feels in terms of comfort, how heavy or how big they are, is it easy to pack, how whether or not like it's open over ear or closed back or on ear. Those things are all going to make a difference. And finally, the modularity. Do they have removable cables, removable pads? How easy is it to change? If anything needs fixing, can it be done or does it have to be sent back to the manufacturer? All right, so let's get started. First, the price. The KPH30i's are one of almost the urban legends of the headphone community for how affordable they are, combined with how good they sound. I personally paid $20 for these off of drop.com. I think they typically go between $20 and $30 on Amazon. That's a pretty smoking deal for the kind of headphone that you're getting out of this. The Koss KPH30i's, I don't know if you can see it, are actually sort of open back. And I shouldn't say sort of, they're very open back based on my testing. And that's pretty rare for A, affordable headphones, and B, pretty much almost everything under $100 with a few exceptions. They tend to go towards closed back for a variety of reasons. Normally this form factor is meant to be traveled with. Normally that means you're trying to cancel out sounds coming in or trying to prevent other people from being bothered by what you're listening to. It's pretty rare to see an open back version of that. So price, A, it's very affordable. This is one of the 2 most affordable headphones, or 3 most, that I'll be reviewing. This falls safely under the $25 bracket, I think. It's pretty easy to come across for 20 bucks. So yeah, price is pretty solid. What do you plan to do with the headphones? Now these are on-ear headphones, right? These are not big enough to or travel around your entire ear. So they will be resting directly on your ear. These types of lightweight headphones typically are meant more for, use while walking around, on the go, something to pack that fits, neatly inside of a bag or something. And this can do all of those things, and I think it's really meant for it too, especially because it has a microphone built into the line. It suggests it's meant to be used for phone calls, speaking over, like Zoom or Discord, that kind of thing. I think it's really meant to be used as sort of like a work or a study or some kind of productivity headset, even just walking around. Not normally going to be the first choice for someone's desktop mic, but if you're low on cash and you just want something that's going to work and keep you, going, if you want to use it for all sorts of things like media consumption and games, it can do that. It can flex into those roles, but really primarily it's meant more for mobile use, I think. Now, this is one thing I have to give Koss credit for, right? These things really don't have that same rattly problem except for the little rubber headband suspension, which I don't count because it's supposed to be sort of flopsy. They don't have that rattly sound. They don't give you that sense that they're going to fall apart when you are handling them. And Koss does have a pretty phenomenal lifetime warranty usually with their products, so I'm normally pretty confident in using Koss products out and about. I don't have to worry too much about it. That said, the plastic itself does actually feel pretty sturdy. You'll notice that most of it is plastic, right? There's no metal bands in here. It's plastic. Even the clicking system, I think, is plastic too. It's hard to see though. It just rides on these rails basically. And then the pads themselves, the stock pads are foam. you can see that I actually replaced the old pads with these Yaxi pads, which are a little bit thicker, a little bit softer. Yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, besides that, the cables, for instance, are fixed, and you have a really thin cable in here. It doesn't have the same kind of janking problems that the Sony has. The cable itself it's actually not like much thinner than the Sony, but it doesn't feel as like hard or rubbery, especially to the two parts going out to the headphone. Now, you will notice that these are on ear. And if I give you the right shot, you can actually see one of my biggest complaints about these, right? So these headphones, because of the way that they're made, there's no real allowance for these cups to move up and down to conform to the head. So if they're not being stretched all the way out to fit because your head's a little bit thinner than they were designed for, you can see that it's got a sort of a V shape. And there's going to be more pressure on the bottom of your ear than on the top. And that's a problem for me because my head does not make these stretch out all the way. And so the bottom of my ears do feel sore after wearing these for about 15 to 20 minutes. There is significantly more pressure on the bottom and it's uncomfortable. So it's really hard for me to wear these long term. Even for a short walk, it's not the most comfortable thing for me. And as a result, I typically don't wear these a lot. So it's hard for me to get excited about the sound because I can't wear them. I would rather wear the Sonys, which I think I can safely admit don't sound as good as the Koss. But they sound acceptable, and the comfort is such a step up that I will take that exchange. Personal opinion, your mileage may vary. So for me, the comfort's not great on these, even with spending almost as much on the headphones as the pads. You know, it is what it is. The problem does not have to come with weight or like pressure on the head, by the way. So when I'm wearing these, the issue really is down at the bottom of the ear from the clamp. Otherwise, these are actually pretty comfortable because they're so lightweight. They almost feel like they're floating on your head, but for the clamp for me. So comfort-wise, these are kind of a loser. I'm probably not going to hold on to these for much longer because of that. I just can't wear them comfortably. Now, one part of the open back design on this, like I was saying, I do prefer open back for certain scenarios, like walking out and about and outside. Not so much if I'm studying in a coffee shop or a library and I don't want to bother others, or I'm trying to keep like the terrible cafe music out. I found that these have almost no isolation. I'm going to cut in some footage of me testing these on a foam block with a sound pressure meter. Again, I found the sound pressure meter is not the best teller of tales in regards to how much isolation you're getting, because I notice it tends to favor certain frequencies and not others. So it doesn't tend to read reliably depending on how these drivers are voiced. That said, I ran a separate test simultaneously where I would stand 5 feet away where the camera was. I would walk 10 feet away into the next room, 20 feet down the hall, and 40 feet down to the garage of my single-story house. It's almost a straight shot because it's one long hallway from the garage to the kitchen where I was filming. I could hear these 5 feet away, 10 feet away, 20 feet away, and I could still hear it well enough to hum along to the song at 40 feet away. There is almost no isolation going on. I could hear this and everything, not just like one part of the song. I could almost hear everything going on 40 feet away in a quiet house. That is terrible isolation. So if you're looking for something that you don't want to bother coworkers with, or you don't want to bother someone that you live with, this would not be my pick. This would definitely be something that you want to enjoy something, or you want sound to come in from outside environment because you want to be able to hear them and you're not as worried about bothering them. Yeah, you have to specifically, I think, want that open environment from these. Just, yeah, just my 2 cents. And finally, the modularity. I do know that some people do actually try to put balance connectors on these headphones. And I don't know. They're $20 headphones, and I think there are already so many better options in the $50 category. I wouldn't bother. Personally, I don't think any benefit of balancing these would, outweigh just moving to better drivers entirely. I guess you could have different feelings on, or no, you definitely could have different feelings on it, but that's just how I feel. So that said, like for $20, I told you I changed the pads on these. That was actually a terrible experience. You basically have to tear out the stock pads in order to put the Axie pads on. So if you actually prefer the old pads, you have to, even being very careful doesn't guarantee you won't tear the crap out of the old pads. So I would not really rank them highly on the modularity scale. Fixed cables, more or less fixed foam pads that don't involve the destruction of the old ones. But it is possible to put the new ones on. And yeah, they do have a lot of flexibility into various roles if you can fit them into your life knowing what the weaknesses are. Right, so I'll get to the sound in a minute, but my long story short here for all of the non-sound stuff is you have to be okay with the complete lack of isolation. You have to be relatively comfortable with the fact that things are relatively fixed unless you're okay with pretty much destroying the headphones, because you do have to break apart, not break apart, but when you take it down, you do have to get some pieces apart that have the potential of breaking your headphones in order to mod it, which is, it could be frightening for people who don't know what they're doing. That said, it does come with a built-in mic, so if you want to use it for certain scenarios, like if you're working remotely, for instance, and you need a headset, this might be okay. Or if you're working in a group or something, and you're okay with the sound bleeding through, it's not that big of a deal. It also works very basically as a gaming headset. I actually think the sound quality is fine. You just have to be okay with the comfort, especially for long gaming sessions. It might be a problem for some people and not others. But having the built-in mic is nice for that. It's convenient, at least. You don't have to go out and buy a $40 or $20 USB condenser mic for your desk or anything. And if you don't have the desk space, you don't have to go out and buy a $50 mod mic. It's convenient. It helps. I will include a soundbite of the recording made using this. And I will also be comparing it against the Sony ECM CS3 clip-on lavalier mic. Now, one interesting tidbit about this. The microphone in this headset, here's the 3-prong, by the way, to show you. The microphone in this headset is not a completely passive microphone like I thought it was. I did not know this. I was under the impression that most mics were either unpowered, like the dynamic mics I might use for some of my recordings, or they require 48-volt phantom power, like the condenser mics that a lot of people are used to seeing on high-end recording setups. This doesn't use 0 or 48, but 1.5 volt, just like the Sony. So I actually had to come up with a separate recording rig, essentially, to deal with that, because I needed a transformer to convert 48-volt phantom power down to 1.5 volt. So that might affect you if you're planning on doing any kind of recording with this microphone, just to let you know. But yeah, let me add in the clip of the recordings here so you can compare the sound. This script was written in Diamine Red Dragon. Cannibals around the world rejoice at the sight of their favorite ink, which pairs nicely with a bottle of Chianti. This is a prepared script to test the microphone and audio interface. Currently, you're hearing the Sony ECM CS3 through the Tascam DP008EX recorded using a Rode VXLR Plus transformer to convert 48-volt phantom power to 1.5-volt plug-in power. This audio was recorded speaking directly into the microphone with it clipped to the collar of my shirt. This script was written in Diamine Red Dragon. Cannibals round the world rejoice at the sight of their favorite ink, which pairs nicely with a bottle of Chianti. This is a prepared script to test the microphone and audio interface. Currently you're hearing the Koss KPH30i inline mic through the Tascam DP008EX, recorded using a Rode VXLR Plus transformer to convert 48-volt phantom power down to 1.5-volt plug-in power. This audio was recorded speaking into the microphone as I wear the headphones naturally. I'm not holding up the microphone portion up to my mouth or anything. It's just a natural sound. Now I've also taken some footage weighing this on a scale so you can see the weight in grams with and without the cable. You'll see that it is very lightweight and could be comfortable if you can get these to fit your head properly. As to the sound of these headphones, you may be surprised, you may not be. There is a lot of hype about these headphones floating on the internet about how great they sound for how much money you pay. There's a lot of memes about them being top of the line for people. It is a funny joke, but it might also set the expectations for these a little too high for people who have a hard time letting that hype kind of build up in their head about it. They are $20 to $30 headphones, and they sound slightly better than $20 to $30 headphones. That's about the extent of the product. You'll find that the stage is surprisingly decent for the price point. I think being open back helps in that regard, but it's not fantastic. There's a bit of depth, a lot of width, but the depth isn't fantastic. You're not going to be shattering any records here with the stage. And there is a slight veil pretty much across the spectrum, right? It doesn't sound like it's further away, but it sounds like there's a piece of material between you and the source of the sound. It's okay. You know, it does suck some of the energy out of the music, but it's not, it's not going to suck the fun out of the entire experience, depending on the type of music you listen to. Now, there is decent separation for the instruments on this. I never really found a point where the instruments sounded congested, even with larger band music. I could listen to, like, Beethoven's Ninth. I could listen to symphonies. I could listen to video games live. I could listen to movie soundtracks. It's all fine. You're not going to run into issues where there's so much going on that you lose track of where the instruments are. That's not going to happen. At least it hasn't yet with my listening. Now, what I did find is there's a tiny bit of muddiness to it where the bass and the mids meet. If you get a significantly, emphasized bass line at the same time that there should be low, male vocals going on, you can get a little bit of wonkiness to the sound where they start bleeding into each other. It's not the most distracting thing I've come across, but when you compare it to other headphones, even for like 10 or 20 bucks more, it'll stand out. It'll stand out. Now, these do have a warm of neutral signature, and they do have a V curve, but it's much more slight than the Sonys. The mids and vocals do feel a little bit more naturally placed. There's not like this giant vacuum in between the treble and the bass. The mids don't feel like they've just been, had everything pulled out of them. So one thing that did stick out is I felt like the bass just felt more prominent. I think that had more to do with when the music I was listening to, a lot of it does have a lot of heavy bass. When I compared it side by side with Sony, the problem didn't seem as bad, but I do remember the first time putting the headphones on, I was surprised by how much or how prominent the bass was. Yeah, I mean, it's not distracting. It's not a distracting problem. At least once you get used to it, you do sort of get like a brain burn in pretty quickly. But I did feel like the bass was probably more prominent than anything else on that was being presented by the headphones. Now, the warm signature does mean that the strings, right, like violins, they're gonna lack attack. They're gonna lack energy. They're gonna lack detail. I just found that in particular, a lot of the music I listened to is orchestrated, and just felt like strings felt kind of lifeless. Electric guitar and brass can be engaging depending on the recording. I threw some Real Big Fish and some other ska on there, and it was fun to listen to. You know, I didn't feel like I was wasting my time with the headphones on my head. So, one thing is that the top end definitely does lack some energy, and the vocals do have a slight recess. So if you like your vocals really up front, these really aren't going to get you there. And if you like a lot of detail and sort of like a bright tuning, again, these aren't going to get you there. Now, between these and the Sony for under 25, these are probably, no, these are better than the Sonys, but still not what I would consider bright. So if you like bright, you might prefer a different pair that I'm going to be reviewing later, under $25. This still is more to my tonal preference, which is warm of neutral. All right. Now, one thing that is kind of interesting about this, the acoustic instruments, for me, just lack any kind of character, right? I was talking about the violins before, but that also includes guitars. Some of the music I listen to, you know, you'll get kind of like a country guitar or like a folk guitar, that kind of thing. It just kind of bores me a little bit. Now, that in those scenarios, these headphones do actually have kind of like the, I could be doing something better with my time or by wearing something else on my head. So if you're into a lot of acoustic performances, live performances, that kind of stuff, this may not be ideal. Personal preference, though, right? So these do have a relatively mellow electric guitar. I was saying earlier how it's not like a problem when you're listening to rock because there's a lot of other stuff going on. If you're listening to metal and the whole focus of the song is on the guitar, it's too mellow for that. It's a little too boring. I don't think it's going to be the best option. Now, the bass, like I said, is the most present emphasis. That's the most obvious to the person who's listening to it, I think. But the extension isn't that great. It doesn't go too far into the sub bass. You don't get a lot of the textures that you might get, you know, with a more extended headphone where you can hear a little bit more of what's going on in the sub bass, especially with like kick drums and stuff. And the imaging isn't the most precise, but under $25 is pretty fantastic. It's definitely a step up from the Sony in that regard. I feel like the directions were a little bit clearer than the Sony as to where everything was coming from. Things still come from the right general spots. And, you know, under this price point, I think asking for too much more than good is asking for too much. It's a perfectly serviceable thing. I've played this in games. Again, like the Sony, I've used it in things like Destiny 2 and Resident Evil Village. Again, it was functional enough where I could wear the headphones and play them, and it was enjoyable except for the fact that they weren't comfortable. So again, if they fit your head, these could flex into a lot of different roles. And, I mean, that's about it, really. The comfort for me makes listening to long, extended periods difficult. You may not have that problem, but I certainly do. And so, you know, I didn't enjoy sitting there listening to these headphones. I kind of had to take off bites here and there, listen to 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, to get a good impression because I just didn't enjoy wearing them. This came in way ahead of my Sony. I've had these for a while. But when they showed up and I tested them side by side, even though it felt like I enjoyed listening to the Koss more, I ended up wearing the Sonys more because they were more comfortable. And that, that's just how it goes. I guess I heard once on, I believe it was Z Reviews, and he said, it doesn't matter how good something sounds. If it doesn't feel comfortable on your head, you're not going to wear them. And at the time I thought, I don't know, something sounded really good. Maybe I would. But it turns out he was 100% right. You have to find the thing that's going to feel comfortable on your head, and that's going to vary from person to person. And so it's hard for me to jump on the hype bandwagon here for the Koss because I just don't enjoy wearing them. And so no matter how good it sounds, I just kind of feel like, yeah, but I can't wear them, And so, like, that's pretty much my feeling on these. I definitely feel like if it's something that you're going to be comfortable wearing, they are a heck of a deal, which is why I don't mind setting the review out, Like, I don't mind spending time on this. But if they're not going to be comfortable for you, I would say look elsewhere. And so I have the Sonys that I think personally are a little bit easier to accommodate more head shapes and sizes. And then I'll also be reviewing the JVC HA-RX 500 under $25. So thank you for watching. Look forward to my next review, and I will see you next time.